So we are reading Zero Limits by Joe Vitale and Dr. Hugh Lin. We are on chapter 4, page number 32 of the book and page number
32 of the PDF also.
Shivangla, again, you have to come closer to your mic.
I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. As we went through the first weekend event, the phrase I love you became part of my mental chatter. Just as sometimes you wake up with the song playing in your head, I'd wake up hearing I love you in my head. Whether I consciously said it or not, it was there. It was a beautiful feeling. I didn't know how it was clearing anything, but I did it anyway. How could I love you be bad in any way, shape, or form?
So these are the 4 phrases that is used in Ho'oponopono. I love you, I am sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. Okay, you can repeat it in any order. They don't really specify that you have to do it in this order. But yeah, if you follow the order, it's always better. Now, what he says over here, I love you became a part of my mental chatter. So when I'm doing something, the brain cannot do 2 things at the same time, right? So now if you're repeating a mantra, that mantra resonates inside your head and you become centered, you become focused, you come into the present. So this was the reason why repeating of the mantras was so important in literally every culture. Okay. Over here, he says that I love you was constantly repeating in my head. And I love you cannot be negative or depleting in any case. Everything is uplifted by love because the 2 basic emotions are fear and love. If I'm connecting with love, I'm automatically on the right side of the grid and I'm in an uplifting flow rather than a depleting flow.
At one point in the event, Dr. Hewlin again singled me out. He asked, Joseph, how do you know whether something is a memory or an inspiration? I didn't understand the question and said so. How do you know if someone who gets cancer gave it to themselves or it was given to them by the divine as a challenge to help them? I was silent for a moment. I tried to process the question. How do you know when an event is from your own mind or from the mind of the divine? I have no idea, I replied. And neither do I, Dr. Hewlin said. And that's why you have to constantly clean, clean, clean. You have to clean on anything and everything, as you have no idea what is a memory and what is inspiration. You clean to get a place of zero limits, which is the zero state.
So there's a thin line, right, which divides what we are doing with our conscious mind and what is coming from below the line. The trick is really to understand what is coming from below the line. And it's not an easy task to do, right? So when even in the workshops, in the Monroe workshops, when we are going into these expanded states, you have to be able to start discerning. You have to get the feel of what is coming from below the line and what is in your conscious mind. So you have to transcend your conscious mind to go into that deeper state of being so that you can start understanding it. Now, over here, he clearly says that we do not know what's coming from memory and what is an inspiration. So the idea very clearly here is keep getting rid of the memory as much as possible. Keep getting clearing, so that you come into a state where you're a blank slate. Now, if I have a whiteboard which is totally filled up with all sorts of writing, even if something new comes in there, nothing is going to be seen. So how do I be able to see what's on the whiteboard which is coming in? I need to first clean the whiteboard, and then if I draw another line, I can see it. So what he's saying clearly over here is our job is to constantly clean, constantly clear ourselves of the junk that we have been carrying around for no reason whatsoever. And the moment we start clearing the junk, that is when the magic starts happening, because that is when the inspiration starts to shine clearly in on our whiteboard. Yes, Kavita Didi?
So, Nikit, looking at from the Vedanta side, if we do all the cleaning, we can also get rid of our vasanas.
Absolutely. So what is he talking about? Today, when you look at it from the Vedantic principle of Prarabdha and Sanchit Vasanas, what comes out clearly in the Vedanta talks also is that a person who is self-realized has cleared all their Sanchit Vasanas and they are playing out their Prarabdha Vasanas which they have agreed to experience in this particular lifetime. Right.
Exactly.
So that is what is playing out in this lifetime. But then the baggage that they've been carrying, they are clearing it out. So this is exactly what he is talking about here also. In his talks, I don't know if you remember, but he said there is a memory of the space.
Yeah.
The space has the memory of anything that happened in that space. The chairs have a memory of everyone who sat on the chair. So
Exactly.
before he goes into a particular place to give a talk, he is actually clearing the space of all the garbage, all the junk that has been in the space before he goes into the space. So very clearly he's saying the same thing here. Whatever happens, we need to keep constantly clearing ourselves. And let me tell you, there is no end to clearing because we've had tens and thousands of lives, right? So क्या चीज क्लियर होएगा, कब कौन सा चीज निकल के आएगा, we have no idea. So the more we clear ourselves, the more we let go of our baggage, the better off we are in any given situation.
Dr. Hewlin states that our minds have a tiny view of the world, and that view is not only incomplete but also inaccurate. I didn't buy this concept until I picked up the book The Wayward Mind by Guy Claxton.
So over here, we have to be under, what does he state clearly? Our minds have a tiny view of the world, and that view is not only incomplete, but it is inaccurate. So what are we looking the world through? Our perceptions. We've all got, all got colored glasses in front of our eyes, and we are viewing the world through those colored glasses. So everyone's view of the world is very different from anyone else's view of the world, right? And it is inaccurate because you are really not being able to perceive everything. For example, today the view that a fly has of the world is very different from that worldview of a frog or that of an elephant or that of a cow, or forget those animals, okay? Each one of us has a different view of the world, whether we like it or not. Prashant, it's getting unmuted all the time. Prashant, you're unmuting. Shivangla, we can't hear you. Shivangla, you there? Oops.
I am in the right place. In it, Claxton writes of experiments that prove our brains tell us what to do before we consciously decide to do it. In one famous experiment, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet hooked people up to an electroencephalogram (EEG) machine, which showed what was happening in their brains. It revealed that a surge of brain activity took place before the person had the conscious intention to do something, suggesting that the intention came from the unconscious and then entered conscious awareness.
So, 1 second. Right. So now this is a beautiful concept. And this is, again, I'm repeating what we've done in biogeometry. So I'm just sharing my screen once. I've explained this before, but I'm doing it again. So what it says is that if this is a straight line, for a straight line to manifest, of course, it has to come from the unconscious. This is what he's suggesting over here. It reveals that there's a surge of brain activity that took place before the person had the conscious intention of doing something, right? Now, this surge of energy in biogeometry, what they say, that there is a field which gets generated over here, and they say that this has something called BG3. Okay, they call it biogeometry 3. Okay, so now this BG3 exists before the line comes into existence. And the other thing that they say, and it can be tested using the instruments, is that over here you have ultraviolet, and over here you have infrared. Right. So because of this, you can actually get to know from which side did the pen start writing. So what he's saying over here is exactly this. Shivangla, you can share again. This is what he's saying over here is exactly this, that before anything happens, there's a surge of energy at an unconscious level, which manifests what is happening at the conscious level.
Claxton writes that Liebe discovered that the intention to move appeared about a fifth of a second before the movement began, but that a surge of activity in the brain reliably appeared about a third of a second before the intention.
So, what does this imply? Now, they did another experiment. It's in another book, The Conscious Universe, where they did experiments where they put people in front of screens, and I've mentioned this before, and started putting photos or pictures in front of them. And what was clearly seen was that the body reacted split seconds before the picture actually came on screen. So this is exactly what he's saying over here. Discovered that the intention to move appeared about a fifth of a second before the movement began. So the brain has already activated something, and then the action takes place. Okay, this is very, very clear that the body knows and the body reacts before you even have the thought to do something. So something is happening before things start actually happening.
According to William Irwin in his book on desire, Why We Want What We Want, experiments such as these suggest that our choices are not formed in a conscious, rational manner. Instead, they bubble up from our unconscious mind, and when they finally reach the surface of consciousness, we take ownership of them.
So, what is happening? What is available to us is this guy. But where is most of the activity happening is in this guy. So whenever we are thinking of something, it is actually manifesting here and then bubbling up from here to here. But because we are only aware of this guy, we think that we are thinking that, but it is actually coming from below the line. So in most of the workshops, what we used to do when we had physical workshops, I used to draw a circle. And the question was, how much of what is happening in your body are you aware of? We used to get answers from 10% to 80, 90%. But the fact is that we are really not aware of most of what is happening in our body system, which is this guy. Most of the stuff is happening over here, which is exactly what he is saying over here. But when it starts happening, we think that we are thinking it, but it has actually come from below the line.
And Benjamin Libet himself, the man who ran the controversial and revealing experiments, wrote in his book Mind Time, the unconscious appearance of an intention to act could not be controlled consciously. Only its final consummation in a motor act could be consciously controlled.
So what does this imply now, right? The intent to act is not in our conscious control, but whether it physically manifests or not, that is the only thing that is in our control. So when you look at it from the point of view of what we read in emotional intelligence, when we were reading emotional intelligence, we spoke about the amygdala hijack, right? Now, when something comes up from the unconscious, it'll the neural pathway, or from the sensory perception that we are having, the neural pathway to the amygdala is shorter than that to the neocortex. So when something bubbles up, we cannot control that intent. But if we take a pause, right, like when we tell a child, take a deep breath, or we say count from 1 to 10 before taking an action, or we step back and have a glass of water. Recently, I've been telling people that when you're getting annoyed, catch your nose. Okay, so that creates a pause. When that pause is created, then you can control the action. So only the final consummation in a motor act can be consciously controlled. So that is the only thing that we can actually control. But that impulse is not something that we can consciously control. But yes, we can build muscle memory that impulse only doesn't come, because a conscious mind can send a message to the unconscious mind also that this is the way that we need to behave, or this is the way that we ought to behave in any given circumstances. So when we start giving an instruction and following a particular pattern, that creates a new neural pathway in our system. So when we are saying, even what we are talking about, the words that we are using, right? It is a pattern. You do it unconsciously. You are just saying the words. Now, when we bring conscious awareness to the words, then we are creating a new neural pathway. And then what are we exerting over here? The impulse to say trying is there, but we control that impulse and we convert it into attempting. So what are we doing? The act of speaking the word is the motor action, the motor act. We can consciously control that and create a new neural pathway so that we start using attempting instead of using trying. Yes, Anju?
But yeah, it is unconscious mind, or you'll say subconscious mind?
Unconscious and subconscious, you can, for the purpose of what we are doing here, let's make it interrelatable.
Okay.
In other words, the urge to pick up this book may seem like it came from your conscious choice, but in reality, your brain first sent a signal to pick it up, and then your conscious mind followed with a stated intention, something like, "This book looks interesting. I think I'll pick it up." You could have chosen to not pick up this book, which you would have rationalized in some other way, but you could not control the origin of signal itself that was nudging you to take action.
So again, that impulse which is there, the more refined you can make it, right? So when that impulse comes, it can come as an inspiration also. Now, you have to build a relationship with that impulse or that deeper part of yourself so that you can actually use that impulse for your betterment, right? Now, the impulse to read the book is a thing which is going to take you into a higher state. But now if you ignore it, which is where the free will starts to come into play, you can ignore it. Okay. Over here, again, the four S's will start coming in. Swata, that impulse which comes in automatically, whether it has been programmed by your conscious mind or it is bubbling up from below, that is where that discernment starts to take place, whether it is coming by itself or whether you are creating it. So when we are creating it, we are operating from the small mind. When it is coming by itself, it is coming from the bigger mind, provided your conscious mind has not fed it. So that discernment has to start taking place, whether we have fed it or it is actually coming from that divine state or from that expanded state of consciousness.
I know this is hard to believe. According to Claxton, no intention is ever hatched in consciousness, no plan ever laid there. Intentions are premonitions, icons that flash in the corners of consciousness to indicate what may be about to occur.
So again, we go back to when we actually exist in focus 27. When we exist in focus 27, we actually decide as to what we want to experience over here. And let me tell you, when you go into focus 27, there's a planning center. Now, whatever you want to experience here, literally you have to make an arzi over there that this is what I want to experience. The planning center there will then plan the entire operation so that it gives you a congenial atmosphere, a congenial environment, a congenial association of people for you to be able to experience that which you have given the arzi for. So what he says over here, no plan is ever laid there in the conscious mind. It is all coming from the subconscious mind, the plan that we had created when we were in that expanded state. And at times, we can shift our state of consciousness to have a glimpse of that which we had actually planned to do. That is what premonition is all about. Now, anything that has to come into the physical reality first has to be formed in the etheric reality or in the astral reality. Only then it starts coming here. This is something that we got to know very, very well in the out-of-body experience. And William Bullman explains this very well. He actually shares an example about a fireplace that he was wanting to make. And he says that when he went into an out-of-body experience, he actually saw his fireplace being constructed in that expanded state. And then slowly it manifested in the physical environment. So this is what he's saying clearly here, is that the plan is never hatched in the conscious mind. It is always hatched in that expanded state of consciousness.
Apparently, a clear intention is nothing more than a clear premonition. The thing that troubles me is this: where did the thought come from?
So very clearly, right? When we set an intent and we have clarity of intent, then the possibility of it manifesting becomes more pronounced. Okay. Now, what normally happens to us? We desire A, but we don't desire B. And A and B are interrelated. For example, everyone wants to become a rich man, but in their mind, they have a fear that when they become a rich man, what will they do with all the money? People will get after them, asking them for money. The gundas may come after them to, kidnap them. If they have money, then they may build an organization. And then how will they run the organization, which may have 500 people? Then they become responsible to pay the salaries of 500 people. Now, I want to be rich, but there is a fear also associated with that rich. So what is going to manifest? a sum total of whatever you're thinking, a khichdi will happen, and then that will result. That is what will manifest. But if we can have clarity of one pointed intent, then that whatever you intend will manifest. So this was the reason of Tathastu. When our sages, our spiritual masters, they were able to just say that this will happen, and it used to happen. Why? Because they had clarity of intent. There was no duvida, there was no disharmony in their intent. And then naturally, where did the thought come from? It didn't come from the conscious mind. So naturally, it came from below the line. Nisa, you have something to say? You've unmuted.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the intent. At times we don't know the how we are saying the intent. That was the
Correct.
thing.
Exactly. So the clarity of intent is extremely important. Yes, Pooja?
Yes, so I'm Pranav. So actually, I wanted to ask that if our mind sends an unconscious signal, for example, to pick up a book, but consciously we don't want to, do it consciously, then what happens?
So right. So I'm so glad you're joining, Babu. Whose son are you? Oh, Pranav. Okay, Pooja's son. Right. Wonderful. I'm so happy you're joining. So what is it? You have something called free will. Unmute yourself, beta. So you have something called free will. Okay. Mummy tells you to do something. Do you do everything Mummy tells you to do?
I try to do it.
You try to do it, but do you do everything she tells you to do?
No.
You don't, right? So what are you exercising?
Free will.
Exactly. So पीछे में कोई आवाज बोल रहा है. Some आवाज is telling you that pick up the book, but you have the authority to listen or to ignore. So you have to start taking a decision and a call as to whether that small voice is more accurate or the big voice, which is coming from your conscious mind, is more accurate. And then you will act accordingly.
Okay.
Have you got that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for asking the question. I'm very, very happy. Wonderful. Keep joining the sessions.
Yes.
This is mind blowing. Since I wrote about the power of intention in my book, The Attractor Factor, and since I spoke about it in the movie The Secret, coming to realize intentions aren't my choice at all was a shock. It appears that what I thought I was doing when I set an intention was simply verbalizing an impulse already in motion from my brain. The question then becomes what or who made my brain send the intention? In fact, I later asked Dr. Hewlin, who's in charge? He laughed and said he loved the question. Well, what's the answer?
Sorry. So now in this book, he very clearly states that what he had mentioned in the book Secret, very clearly, all the authors are saying that if you want something, you got to constantly think of it. You put a picture of it on your wall. You go to the showroom and see that thing all the time. So all the time you're constantly thinking of the thing that you want to manifest, right? But that is operating from a totally materialistic perspective, because you really don't know what is the bigger picture. And as we've started doing in awareness is that we say this or better. Now today in my chota conscious mind, I may think that I need a Maruti 800 to go from point A to point B, but we don't know how divinity will manifest that for us. Maybe someone will come and pick us up all the time and take us to that space. or divinity may give us a Mercedes Benz instead of a Maruti 800. So what will happen if we leave it to divinity? It's always better, right? So he says, what came to my realization, intentions aren't my choice at all. It was a shock. It appears as though what I thought I was doing when I set an intention was simply a verbalization of an impulse which was already there. So the small voice is what is actually running us. But the ego feels, because that guy is controlling this guy, that it is running the game, but actually it is not.
I confess.
So, excuse me, sorry. Excuse me. It means we don't need to set an intent. We should just leave it to divinity.
Provided you can operate with that level of consciousness, where if you see where Reverend Bill was operating from, he was accepting everything that was manifesting and he considered it the will of the divine, right? Are you willing to go into that level?
Okay.
So if we are not at that level, then we have to move one step at a time. The first thing would be to attempt to start accepting whatever is happening, that it is happening for the greater good.
Good.
But
okay.
we are happy when something in what is happening to us in our perspective, we feel is good. But if something goes wrong with us, then we start playing the game that why me? Okay, so we need to understand that whatever happens, then happens for the good. If you lose your hand, it happened for the good. If you lose, if someone dies on you, it happened for the good. So that acceptance has to come in. Otherwise, how are you going to shift? It's not possible.
I confess I was still confused about intentions. I lost 80 pounds by being mentally tough and asserting my intention to lose weight. So, was I declaring an intention or just responding to my brain's signal to lose weight? Was it an inspiration or a memory? I wrote and asked Dr. Hewlin. He replied, saying, nothing exists at zero. Ao aqua, no problems, including the need for intention. Weight concerns are simply memories replaying, and these memories displace zero, you. To return to zero, you require divinity erasing memories behind weight concerns. Only two laws dictate experiences: inspiration from divinity and memory stored in the subconscious mind, the former brand new and the latter old. Jesus is purported to have said, seek ye first the kingdom, zero, and all else will be added, inspiration. Zero is the residence of you and divinity, from where and from whom all blessings, wealth, health, and peace flow. POI, Dr. Hewlin.
So beautifully said, right? When we are in zero, then everything is. So there are no issues. There is no good, there is no bad. You have transcended duality. There is no more duality when you are at zero. When you are out of zero, that means that is where the memory starts to play the game, right? So he says simply, weight concerns are simply memory replaying, and these memories displace zero. So if you have a memory, that means you're not in zero. The idea is that the more we clean ourselves of memories, the more towards zero we are going to get. And this is beautiful that two laws dedicate experience: inspiration from divinity and stored memories. Okay. Basically, you can either act out of inspiration or you can act out of memory. And the third state is you are acting out of zero. Then you stop acting at all. There will be no action if you reach zero. And of course, seek ye the kingdom, which is 0, and then everything else will happen, which is the inspiration. And ultimately, 0 is what our home is. We are all a part of that whole. And the basic point why we are here is to go back home, which is 0.
From what I could see, Dr. Hewlin was looking past intentions and going to the source, the 0 state, where there are 0 limits. From there, you experience memory or inspiration. Concern about weight is a memory. The only thing to do is love it and forgive it, and even give thanks for it. By cleaning it, you ensure that the divine has a chance to come through with an inspiration.
So when you are acting out of memory, the inspiration cannot come through. So the more you get rid of the memory, the more the inspiration starts to enter your system. And where are you going to observe this from? You're going to be attempting to go into that expanded state of consciousness, which is the 0 state. So most excursion participants actually experience this even within the first 2 exercises, that there are no more thoughts. The mind is totally still. And that's when the inspiration can start coming. If you have too many thoughts, then the inspiration can't come. And that is why we say that the Hemi-Sync process or the Monroe processes are basically jhadu marna. You're cleaning up your system.
What appears to be the truth is that my desire to overeat, which made me obese most of my life, was a program. It bubbles up from my unconscious. Unless I clean it, it will stay there and keep bubbling. As it keeps surfacing, I have to keep being aware of my choice to overeat or not. This ends up being a lifelong battle. It's no fun. Yes, you can override the tendency to indulge by saying no to it, but obviously that takes enormous energy and diligence. In time, saying no to indulging may become a new habit. But what a hell to go through to get there. Instead, by
So-
cleaning on the
So what does this imply? Okay, that desire to eat is bubbling up from the unconscious, and then it is making me act in a particular way. So it is a program. Now let us say it is something that we consider not good for us. We know it is not good for us. So it is like a virus in the system. Now let us say your computer program or your computer gets a virus. Then what do? Do you let the virus be there, or do you employ an antivirus system to clean the virus up? So like that, anything that does not serve us and is an auto program which is running, which we keep referring to as a pattern, we keep talking about a pattern, we need to clear it. We need to clean it up, right? So how do we clean it up? Now, by using these phrases, we can attempt to clear it up, because we are allowing divinity to bring clarity into our system by cleaning whatever is not serving us up. And another thing over here, he says, saying no to it doesn't work because you're doing it from here, right? But what is it coming from? From here. So unless you clear it here, it will keep bubbling up even if you clear it here. So saying no does not work. You have to transcend that impulse so that it doesn't come again. And how can you do that? By removing the program itself, by creating a new neural pathway so that that old neural pathway doesn't work at all. It gets eradicated.
Instead, by cleaning on the memory, it will one day disappear. Then the desire to overeat will no longer surface. Only peace will remain. In short, Intention was a limp rag compared to inspiration. As long as I kept intending to do something, I kept fighting with what is. As soon as I gave in to inspiration, life was transformed.
So this is the difference between fighting it, right, and working on it from the conscious mind rather than working it from a expanded state of consciousness. Once we work with an issue from an expanded state, we put ourselves into a position to transcend it. Then it doesn't hurt us anymore. It doesn't have any power over us anymore, and we become peaceful. But if we are fighting it by saying no, then we are fighting. We are not allowing, and we are not letting it go. It still is like a rock on my backpack, and I'm carrying that weight around because that impulse will keep bubbling up.
In short, I still wasn't sure if this was how the world actually worked, and I was still confused about the power of intention, so I decided to keep exploring. I had dinner with Rhonda Byrne, the creator and producer of the hit movie The Secret. I asked her something I longed to know. I asked, did you create the idea for the movie or did you receive the idea? I knew she had received the inspiration to create the now famous movie trailer that caused a viral marketing epidemic. See it at www.thesecret.tv. She once told me that the idea for the movie teaser came to her suddenly within a few seconds. She made the actual preview within 10 minutes. Clearly, she received some sort of inspiration that led to the making of the strongest movie teaser in history. But I wanted to know if the idea for the final feature movie itself came from inspiration or if she felt she did it for some other reasons. This was the crux of my concern about intentions. Were we stating intentions that made a difference or receiving ideas that we later called intentions? That's what I asked her as we sat together at dinner. Rhonda was quiet a long time. She looked off, contemplating my question, searching within herself for the answer. Finally, she spoke. I'm not sure, she said. The idea came to me, for sure, but I did the work. I created it. So I'd say I made it happen.
So now this becomes important, right? She said the idea came to me, and then the ego takes over, that I did the work, so I created it. But even in the process of doing the work, the inspiration is always there. Otherwise, you would not do the work. Okay. So she's actually, it's like a double whammy. So whenever we do something, the ego will want to take, the accolades that, yes, I did it. And when you start doing that, you have to take the disharmony also when something fails. If you really see a saintly person, that person is not going to be affected if everything goes well, and they're not going to be affected if everything goes fut, right? Why? Because they understand that it's not them that is making it happen. Something else is making it happen, and they are inspired to do something. Over here, clearly, I created it. So I'd say I made it happen. So the I has come in, right? So ego has come into the picture.
Her answer was revealing. The idea came to her, which means it came to her as an inspiration. Since the movie is so powerful, so well done, and so brilliantly marketed, I can only believe it's all the divine unfolding. Yes, there was work to do, and Rhonda did it, but the idea itself came as an inspiration.
So what has been seen is that whenever something big happens, right, the ego may think that it's doing it, but actually many people, many things, many happenings have to conspire to happen at the exact right time for anything to manifest. So it is really a fallacy that really we alone do anything. It is always a collaborative kind of an exercise, and that can only happen when there is someone who is coordinating that entire effort. Okay, so naturally divinity has a core, or is the program which is actually running all the programs. It's just that we don't know who is running the program.
It's interesting that after the movie had been out for several months and the buzz for it was reaching historic proportions, Rhonda sent out an email to all the stars in it, saying the movie now had a life of its own. Rather than stating intentions, she was answering calls and seizing opportunities. A book was coming out. Larry King was doing a two-part special based on the ideas in the movie. An audio version was coming out. Sequels were in the works. When you come from the zero state where there are zero limits, you don't need intentions. You simply receive and act, and miracles happen.
So beautifully put over here. Okay, so she says it over here. The movie now had a life of its own. Rather than stating intentions, she was answering calls and seizing the opportunity. So what was she doing? She was saying yes to whatever was appearing in front of her. She didn't need to set intention anymore, because now divinity was running it, and she was allowing divinity to run the whole process. So when you look at it again from the 4 S's, very clearly, what is it saying over here? The first thing, swata, okay? She was just answering calls and seizing the opportunity. She was not making the calls come, swata, right? The next one is sahaj. It was easy for her to receive the calls and take the opportunities. What was the right thing to do for the greater good was to seize the opportunity, and she accepted it. So all the 4 S's were working over here, and things started to happen, right? Right. So it says over here, when you come from the zero state, where there are zero limits, you don't need intention. Things just happen. So the magic starts to happen.
You can stop the inspiration, however. Rhonda could have said no to the nudge urging her to make the movie. That seems to be where free will comes into play. When the idea, someone is annotating.
Okay.
Rhonda could have said no to nudge urging her to make the movie. That seems to be where free will comes into play. When the idea to do something appears in your mind, coming from either inspiration or memory, you can choose to act on it or not if you are aware of the impulse.
So again, the first thing is awareness. If you're not aware of something, there is no, you can't do anything about it. So becoming aware of where it is coming from, and then discerning that, that feel of whether it's coming from this guy or whether it's coming from this guy, is actually the name of the game. And the more you start connecting with that small voice, the more inspired you automatically start becoming.
According to Jeffrey Schwartz, in his powerful book, The Mind and the Brain, your conscious will, your power to choose, can veto the impulse that started in your unconscious. In other words, you may get the impulse to pick up this book, but you can override that impulse if you want to do so. That's free will, or as Schwartz describes it, free won't.
So now words like can't, won't, all these words, they actually restrict you. Okay. So when that impulse comes, we can use our free will to cancel it out by using these words. But the more you start saying yes, the more you start allowing things to manifest through you, the more powerful it automatically starts to become.
It's 3:20, Bhaiya. You
Yeah,
said you
just
have a
one
class.
paragraph left. One paragraph left. Let's finish.
He writes that in later years, he, Libet, embraced the notion that free will serves as a gatekeeper for thoughts bubbling up from the brain and did not duck the moral implications of that. William James, the legendary psychologist, felt that free will took place after the impulse to do something and before you actually did it. Again, you can say yes or no to it. It takes mindfulness to see the choice. What Dr. Hewlin was teaching me was by constantly cleaning all thoughts, whether inspiration or memory, I would be better able to choose what was right in that moment.
So what is he saying over here clearly, right? That by cleaning, I'm cleaning the slate so that I can clearly be able to distinguish between what is coming from my memory and what is coming through inspiration. That clarity of observation, of perception is what we are looking for when we are cleaning the clutter up.
I began to see that my weight loss came about because I chose not to obey the memory or habit that was nudging me to eat more and exercise less. By choosing not to follow those additive impulses, I was kicking in my free will or free won't ability. In other words, the urge to overeat was a memory, not an inspiration. It came from a program, not from the divine. I was ignoring the program or overriding it. What I gathered Dr. Hewlin would suggest as a better approach is to love the program until it dissolved and that all that remained was divinity.
So
I
So we can't transcend anything by fighting it. The more we fight it, the more it will come. So the words, the more you resist, the more it persists. Okay. So the point is that you need to embrace something, allow it, and then transcend it. You can't fight something to transcend it. You have to embrace it to transcend it.
still didn't quite understand all of this, but I was listening and choosing to not cancel anything out because it was new. Little did I know what was in store for me next.
Great. So this chapter is over.